As an introduction, I'd like to read just part of opening to chapter 2 of his book, just to kind of give you an idea of where we're going with this first. This is from the chapter called The Imaginary Farm. This funny thing happens when people ask where I'm from, especially when I'm at academic conferences where people so often are from uninteresting places. Mississippi, I say. Oh, wow, they say. I can tell they've never seen a real-life racist before. Or at the very least, someone who's related to a racist, or at least has seen one in the wild. It's exciting for them. They want to tweet it to their friends. They want to write a memoir about it. So, they say, what's Mississippi really like? I can tell that what they really want to ask is, what is it like to grow up around crazy people who believe that whatever can't be shot should be baptized? But they're afraid to ask because they're not yet sure if I'm one of those people. Well, I am. Kind of. Sort of. Not really. Sometimes. I do believe in the power of Jesus and of rifles. But to keep things interesting, I also believe in the power of NPR and the scientific method. It's not easy explaining all this to educated people at cocktail parties, so instead, I tell them that it was basically just like Faulkner described it, meaning that my state is too impoverished to afford punctuation, that I've seen children go without a comma for years, that I've seen some families save their whole lives for a semicolon. Last spring, I had a chance to read Harrison's book. It was given to me by our department head. I teach a class called Autobiographical Self, where the boys try to write memoirs. And as soon as I read it and started paying attention to the voice, I knew that it was something that I wanted to teach my guys. And we made it the central text that we use this year at Macaulay for the senior classes. We took it, we took passages, we caper-starred them, we bisected them and dissected them, we compared them to Steinbeck, we compared them to David Sedaris, we wrote essays on those things, and at the end of the day, when we got through with it, and we traced the theme all the way through chapter by chapter, and we're kind of amazed at where we went, we all begin to do a little sinning. We begin to covet his talent. We all begin to wish we could write like him. Spent about 2 weeks telling the boys, quit trying to be Harrison Scott Key. Okay? The one thing you need to do is find your own voice. And that's what I think you'll see if you read his book. It's a unique voice. It's a great talent. And if you read his book, you'll read the other parts of the introduction that I should have given you, except to tell you that he's born in Memphis, raised in Mississippi, and lives in Georgia. He's a Southerner like us, Harrison Scott Key.
Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. It's a great space. Anytime you go to a reading and there are different cheeses available, that's a big deal. There are different types of beer and wine. There's 2 different types of grapes. This is my 61st book event for this book. Don't say woo yet. I mean, I've done events. Whoa. Oh, I'm rolling. Okay. Here I come. I've done book events. I mean, I've done a book event in Mississippi where there were more animals than people at the book event. And some of the animals were doing tricks. I've done book events where there were, I think the largest event I've done so far has had about 350 people. The smallest event has had 2 people, and those people rode with me. And at that event, I walked in, and I was like, this is one of my first book events to do. And I said, this is my first book. I'm 40 years old. This is my first book. If you want to know how long it took me to write it, it took me 10 years to write this book. If you want to know why, we can do that during the Q&A. In fact, right now, I always tell people this, you should just be thinking about the great questions you're going to ask me later. If you have read the whole book all the way through? Raise your hand. Exactly. Only a few people have read the book all the way through. That's sort of how it's supposed to be at an event like this. A lot of people sort of, they come to a book event, they think it's going to be like English class, where there's going to be a test or a quiz. They're going to, when I say, are there questions that you think, like, I'm not judging your questions. I mean, you can ask me, like, do you have pets? I mean, you can ask me anything. So when I say, are there questions, I'm not like going to judge you if the question is dumb. It probably will be dumb. Oh, most questions are, and that's why you ask them, because you don't know things. So ask. So be thinking now. Where was I? It was one of my first book events. And I walked in, and so in my big meeting, I'm not even planning to talk about this, but I'm going to. So we're going to be here for like 4 hours. It's going to be a So my first book, I go into HarperCollins. It's my first big meeting with the marketing team. My agent, she's like, we're going to go to New York, and you're going to meet these people, and you're going to woo them, and you're going to blow them away. It's going to be awesome, and they're going to help like get your book out there. So this was in January of 2015, so about a year and a half ago. The book was coming out in May of 2015. So I came up with a list of all the places where I wanted to do book events. And normally they say, you do a book event in, like, you might do like 4 or 5 cities. That's what a book tour is like these days for most people. You go to like the city where you went to college, and then you go to like where you grew up, and then your own city, and then wherever your mom lives. That's where you go, because her Sunday school will come out for it, and you can't cuss at those. So I wrote down every city that I thought I should do a book event in, and it ended up being about 50 cities. And I don't know why I wrote this list out, but I just felt like, you know what? I feel like Jesus believes in me. I feel like my mom believes in me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do all these cities. It's going to be awesome. Everybody will come. If you build it, they will come. I will do this. So I go into the office in HarperCollins downtown in New York, and it's so great. And like the galleys are there, and I like reach across the table and I like touch them, and it's like touching like a relic, and then like I smell them, and I'm just like licking the books. I'm so happy that it's like a real book that I wrote. And everybody's sort of around the table like, is he done? And I was like, it's exciting. And because I'm a good Southern boy, I brought everybody presents, and I started giving them out pralines and whiskey and stuff. And I was like, guys, I'm so happy. And they were like, calm down. And so we got to the part where we were talking about book tour, and they were like, so where were you thinking you would go on tour? And they, like, in their heads, they were like, Memphis, Jackson, Savannah. And so I slid this list across the table, and it was basically like a list of like every city in America. And they were like, so which one of these do you want to go to? And I was like, honey, all of them. And they were like, do you know people there? I was like, I will. And they were too nice to say no, so like I convinced them, and I felt like I put on a good show there, so they got it. So first book event, and it was in, I'm not going to say what city it was in, but it was in a city. And so the publicist was like, well, do you know anybody in that city? And I was like, no, but I got my wife Taylor Swift tickets to a concert in that city, and I can write the whole thing off if we do a book event there. I was like, my accountant told me to do stuff like that. And they were like, okay. So I go into the book event, and I'm like, the reviews were coming out, it was awesome. I knew like people will come, like the universe will just urge them to go. And so I go, and I get there, and I walk in. The event was supposed to start at 2. It was about 1:45. I had a projector and a gun case. I didn't have anything else to carry then. And I had lots of gun cases. If you've read the book, you know why. And I was like, what do I put this in? I'm like, I got this great big rifle case with like a nature scene on the outside of it. I'll put that in. And then I had my projector in a large black bag. And so I walk into this bookstore at 1:45 with a gun case and a large black bag, and I'm like, I'm here. And they were like, who are you? Get the phone. I was like, I'm the author. They're like, great. Of what? And I like looked, I saw a poster with my book on it. I'm like, that's me. That's me. I was so excited. Like, your whole life you've been waiting for this thing to happen. And all of a sudden you go into a bookstore and they have your book. It's like, it is a miracle. It is. And I was so excited. I was like, I'm here. This is me. Where are the books? Where is everybody? Where are you? Where are they hiding? Are they in the back? The store must go way back, right? And they were like, hold on. And like, she walks away, and she comes back with what looks like an older, wiser employee. And she was like, hi. And I was like, hey, let's go. Let's do this. Let's make it happen. She was like, so do you know many people in this town? I was like, I don't. Do you? And she was like, we made a poster. She points to the poster. I was like, where'd y'all put it up? Because in my day, going to college in the 90s and having a band, like that was what you did. You made a poster and you put it everywhere. You put it in all the bars and the bathrooms. Like you attacked people in the street with flyers. And I was like, where did you put the poster? She's like, I think we made a copy for here and a copy for the break room. So it was now 15 minutes, 10 minutes until the event was to begin, and I was like, the people will come. A bus will pull up. The casino was closed. They're coming into the bookstore. And I go, where do you want to do this? And she goes, I guess we'll do it in the children's section. So she leads me back to the children's section. I just thought I'd go around the corner and it'd be like, the first 2 rows. It'd be doable. And there were some little girls on the floor reading books. And she goes, little girls, y'all are going to have to move. And they were like, why? She was like, this man wants to do a thing here. And I had my gun case and I was like, I felt like Charlie Brown. I was like, don't make them leave. Where are they going to go? She's like, I guess they'll go out on the street. We never saw those kids again. Nobody I called an audible, and I was like, you know what, you nice lady, let's not set the chairs up quite yet. Let's wait and see if anybody comes. And you know what, I'll just hang out near the front door, and I'll sign books if people want to come by. And I sat there, and about this whole time, my wife is eyeballing me from behind the magazine rack. She was there with me and was so embarrassed. And she's like, looking at me, and I was like, come on out, little bunny, come on. And I told her that she had to stand there in front of the table and talk to me like a devoted fan. And so when other people came in, because people come in, to a bookstore, and if you've been that author sitting there and it's like you're signing people up for a credit card at the airport. It's awful. It's awful. The only way you can get people to come up to you at a table when you're sitting there is to have a box of kittens. That is the only way to do it. Food will work, maybe, but kittens and food, definitely. So I'm sitting there, and my wife was like, so you got to talk to me, and you have to, engage. My wife is always telling me to engage with the family. If you're a husband, you probably had that said to you at some point. So I told my wife she needed to engage with my career at this point. So she opened up a copy of the book and put her phone in it, and she just sat there on her phone in front of me. And people would come in and be like, hey, I'll be with you in a second. And they're like, no, we're not here for you. And they just keep walking. And so that was my first book event. So when I say, what a pleasure it is to be here, I mean that. Thank you. Okay, before I begin, there's some trigger warnings. There will be disturbing images. There will be graphic language. I will probably say the F word, the B word, the N word. I feel like these are important to the story I want to tell, so I just want to warn you about that. There will be some heavy breathing. Did you guys hear that interview I did on the radio here?
Yes.
I breathed a lot in that interview, didn't I? There were several moments where I was like, You know why? I did that interview. You know what? This is one of the things you have to learn about being a famous author. I don't know what that's like, but I'm learning because I'm not famous yet. But you have to have a landline because everyone wants to do these radio interviews. And so I was at my faculty office at SCAD, and it's just sort of cubicles in this big room, and lots of people were like debating deconstructionism or something like 5 feet from me while I'm doing the radio interview. And so when I was sighing, it was because of them. I'm like, guys, I'm important. Nobody cares about Derrida. Go away. This is the radio. What else? There will also be punctuation, mammal nudity, self-promotion, and frequent water breaks. Once I Googled how to be a writer. I wrote a story in the Oxford American called How I Became a Famous Writer because of what happened when I Googled that. You Google a lot of things desperately when you're trying to write a book and you're trying to find your voice and you're trying to do something what you feel like something good in the world that you're called to do. And I get emails all the time, and I got a Facebook message today. This guy was like, so how do you get published? Like a Facebook message. Like, now that you're famous, how do you get published? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not published. Like, go away. I was like, be more specific. He's like, he's like, okay, more specific. How do I get published? Like, false. I was like, what genre? What are you talking about? You know, like, you can Google. Like, just Google this, and when you hit a brick wall, then you can Facebook message me. So I Facebook messaged how to be a writer, and one of the items on there was stay hydrated. So I thought that was so silly, and then halfway through book tour, I'm like dying of like dehydration. So I feel like that was true. That was good advice. Before I talk to you a little bit about my book, what I'm going to do is I'll talk a little bit. I'll read a few pieces of the book and sort of give you a little taste of what the book is like, and then we'll open it up for questions. I do want to remind you to turn your cell phones off. So just think real hard about where it is on your body. Locate it with one of your hands and turn it off, silence it, throw it in the toilet. You guys call it a commode anymore? Does anybody call it a commode? Every time I call a toilet a commode, my wife's like, commode? Anybody else? Commode? Thank you. Also call it tinfoil. Anybody else call it tinfoil? I call it tinfoil, and my wife, who's a city girl, she's like, tinfoil? I'm like, shut up! Here's what people said about my book. One of the great things about having a book is that you get to find out what people who were abused think about you. It's very strange reading reviews of your book online, because especially, no matter what it is, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, it's coming out of your soul, and you're trying to make it as good as you can. And so when people review it, it's weird, it's hard, there's nothing new about it. I mean, you open yourself up to that when you write a book, or when you cut a record, or whatever, when you act in a movie. You're opening yourself up to all sorts of things. It's the price of whatever lowercase f fame that you have when you write a book. So I get that, but it's still a very strange thing to read what people say. And the way I describe it to my students is, it's sort of like, imagine if you were at a party with this many of your friends, and you were there all night, and you had fun, and maybe you sang karaoke, and maybe you played some Pictionary, and you had a barbecue, and there was dancing, and it was fun, it was a good time, lots of people were there. It's like leaving the party and then opening up your phone and reading text messages things that people were saying to other people about your karaoke performance. They were not saying good things about it. You suck at karaoke. You know that. You're expecting that they all know that too. It's karaoke. But it's like you're reading people's inmost thoughts. It's very strange, because your friends talk about you. They do. If you don't know that, you're not using your noodle. They talk about you. Your really good ones, maybe not. But the people that you just sort of kind of know, like the people that you're kind of know them on Facebook, but not really, like those people talk about you. They have opinions about what you were wearing, or what your breath smelled like, or how you walk funny, or how you talk funny. They have opinions, and they are hurtful opinions, and those opinions are usually reflections of their own sadness and the frailty and the darkness inside of them. That's okay, I'm a Calvinist, I believe that. What I'm trying to say to you is, we all struggle with those demons and being nice and being sweet and not being struck down by lightning. But when you write a book and you read their reviews online, you're seeing all the people's darkness on the outside, and it's awful. Not everybody's mean. Some people said hilarious and brilliant. Some people said humor that doesn't quit. That was nice. A must for every man with a father, which technically is every man ever. So that's high praise. If you don't have a father, don't read this book. Sad to be finished. I got that in a bunch. That was nice. Laugh out loud funny and also cry out loud. If you want to ask me why I don't like the phrase laugh out loud, I'll be happy to tell you that during the Q&A. I shared a little bit of that at the Baylor School earlier today. This book is magic, which sort of makes me want to ask, like, well, what did it do? Disappear? Did it float? Better than I thought it would be. That was my wife. She doesn't want me to get a big head. She's not really a reader. I always thought I would marry, a person who wanted to talk about existentialism and, epistemology and things like that. And, thank the Lord that I didn't. It would be awful. I know that now because I've heard my own radio interviews. I'm like, I could not stand to be married to anyone who talks like me. My wife, she liked the Harry Potter books. And so did this lady. She's like, yay! Oh. She liked the Mockingbird books, the Mockingjay books, the Hunger Jay books. And so when the book came out, I'm like, there's a lot about you in it. You should read it before my mother does. It's like there's several trips to the OBGYN with you in this book. You should read it because the world is reading this book. She's like, well, the world, don't overdo it. So I was like, you know what I mean. So it stayed by her desk, on her bedside table for like 8 months. I'm like, what do you think about, and I would like make up a chapter. I was like, what do you think about the chapter where I coached the Little League softball team? And she's like, it was good. I'm like, I hate you. Better than she thought it would be. Sometimes she comes to these events. I didn't bring her this time, but sometimes I like to bring her. She rolls her eyes. Not everybody was nice. Here's what the angry people said. Piece of crap. These are direct quotes. 2 stars. That's worse than 1 star. It is. 2 stars is like, 1 star is like that person was having a bad day, but 2 stars is like, I believed in you, Harrison. You let me down. Hateful. Not funny. I like that. I like that one a lot. Because it's like, not funny. Mr. Key needs a new editor. A couple of problems with this sentence. Dr. Key, you mother effer. Dr. Key. I'm not, as my children will tell you, I'm not the kind of doctor that can help people. But I'm still a mothering doctor. I did not enjoy this book at all. It's like, why would you review it then? It's like, I get it. I feel like sometimes these sort of reviews are, if the book has had good press, this is like, you'll get some of these reviews. Most of the reviews have been good, but you'll get these because the book has been talked about in a good way so much. But this sort of review, it's so weird. It's like, there's lots of kinds of food I don't like. I don't like fried food. So it'd be like me like reading a cookbook of fried food and then reviewing it like, well, I didn't like those hush puppies at all. Well, no, of course you didn't. Come on, man. Missing comma. This was good. Come on, man. Like, what was he thinking? 12 tomatoes. I did not correct the spelling here. This is 12 tomatoes. My book was a big hit with the subpar crowd. And my favorite, sad commentary on parenting. Dreadful beyond dreadful. No garbage can would accept it. 2, not 1, not 3, 2. 2 exclamation points. Garbage can. I don't know what that garbage can. Then the author gets married and the whole book goes downhill. I'm like, you said it, buddy. Downhill. Like, you try being in this marriage. It is funny. It does sort of feel like it is one book. It's not 2 books, but it is in 2 halves. If you've read the book, the part 1, there used to be part 1 and part 2. I wanted to call it part 1 and part 2 because I felt the tone and the tenor of the 2 halves were different. In one, I was a boy in the first half in Mississippi. In the second half, I'm an adult or a young adult. The second half takes place between the ages of like 28 and 38. And so it felt like 2 halves of a book. My editor just wanted to take that out. But it definitely, I found that people generally like one half more than the other because they do feel very different. If this is what passes for intelligent humor among our credentialed educators and our institutions of higher learning, our system is indeed broken. The hallmark bitterness of today's self-proclaimed progressives comes through. Who's this person voting for? My question is, why does he think I'm a progressive? It's like all Jesus and guns, like 24/7 in this book. I don't get it. These people clearly did not find it bad. 4 books at the beach, that's great. This person was reading it in the beauty salon. I thought that was nice. Even babies like my book. Like, you tell this baby no garbage can will accept it. 12 tomatoes. How about, I like tomatoes, son? Animals like my book. When I posted this picture on Facebook, all of my Yankee friends were like, oh my gosh, how did that squirrel do that? They're like, my editor was like, this is a big hit around the office. Everybody's so intrigued by how the squirrel is reading the book. So I call up my cousin in Yazoo City. This is his squirrel. Yazoo City, Mississippi. I'm like, Patrick, everybody in New York City wants to know how you got, I gotta tell them, they want to know how you got the squirrel to read the book. And you got, it's a classic Mississippi answer. He goes, dude, I trained him. The hell you think I did? You think I'm like a swami? Not every animal loved my book. Signed copy. That deer needs a vacation. This is what it looks like now. Of course, all those pictures were from the hardcover. So let me read you a little bit of my book. What this book is about. This book is about the South. I'll say this. I did not originally want my book to be about the South. Anybody want to guess why I did not want this book? I didn't want this book to be described as a Southern book. Anybody want to hazard a guess about why? No?
You're embarrassed?
Embarrassed? No.
Because you get compared to all the other Southern writers.
Yes. I thought it would relegate me to a bookshelf I'd never get off of.
It's prejudice.
Now, there's 2 sides of that coin because, once you're a Southern author, there are a lot of the South likes to buy books about itself. The South is a strange place. It's the strangest place in the world. It is the most paradoxical, wildest mix of light and dark and good and evil that has existed in modern memory, I think. Is this working? Okay. And so I think that's good to have a book about it. My agent was like, Harrison, the South likes books about the South. There will be an immediate market for your book if it's about the South. You put deer antlers on the front, you got a third of America. They're paying attention. So that's a good thing. But I was a little worried about getting put in the Southern lit ghetto a little bit, and sort of getting left there. I think about my favorite American writers. They do tend to be. You think about even the great Southern writers. Welty, Faulkner, Percy. They are Southern. I was afraid it being a funny book, that it might be sort of I would be like the new young Louis Grizzard, and that would be it. And people would sort of, that would be the verdict on me. And so I was a little worried about that. But it is a book about the South. And I told my agent, I was like, this is not a Southern book. I don't want this to be a Southern book. And she was like, describe to me what's in it. And I was like, well, it's about hunting and football and baseball and racism. She was like, okay, so there's your answer. So I want to read a little bit. I felt like what I wanted to do is take the stereotypes of the South, and including the good and the bad, including especially bad, and I wanted to stare it head on, and I wanted to write about it honestly. And so I'm going to use some language that may be upsetting to some of you, but I do want to read a little bit of this. Satan created the niggers, I heard a man say on TV one day during some sort of parade. He wore what appeared to be a heavy white caftan and a large conical hat, also of white. And the Lord Jesus Christ created the whites, the confused man said. Is that true, I said, looking to both my parents for an answer. Absolutely not, Mom said. Nobody in this family is racist. We heard the word nigger a lot, but not as much as the flags in our house might have suggested. Pop was not all nigger this and nigger that. We knew this word was dangerous. If you set it up in Jackson, it might get you shot. If you set it out here in the country, it might make somebody think you'd had sex with your sister. Mostly the word was used by old people suffering from dementia and young men suffering from mullets, the sort of men who believed in protecting their heritage and defending a noble agrarian ethos so that one day their children's children could wear a Confederate flag bikini down at the lake while listening to Iron Maiden and smoking a joint the size of a grain silo. I'll just stop there. I knew that I wanted to write a funny book, but I also knew that if it was going to be about the South, it was going to have to deal with a lot of very not funny things. And frankly, that was a challenge to myself. How am I going to write about child abuse and make it funny? How am I going to write about racism and make it funny? And the answer is, you're not making racism funny. You're not making child abuse funny. You're looking at all of the sort of accoutrement around those things and making those things funny. The people who are interacting with those concepts and misunderstanding them and that sort of thing. So very much this book is about the South. Here's a picture of my family taken back then. It's funny, I knew this crowd would get this. When I showed this to my students at SCAD, they were like, I think that's a European band. It's like a gypsy thing. Yep. False. Anybody remember the name of this dog?
Flash.
Flash, thank you. Give that man a free book. It was confusing. I thought they were dating for a lot of this TV show. I was like, they're cousins? And my brother was like, it's Georgia, man. What the hell you think? This is us. If you want to know who the memoirist is in your family photos, they're easy to spot. The one who looks like Dear God, are these my people? Holy hell, how do we get out of here? Yes, that is me. If you read the book, that's Bird. That's my mother. That's Pop. This here's my half-sister. I didn't grow up with her. She still lives in Memphis. She's a sweet lady. She wasn't in a lot of my childhood memories, but I wanted to put her in the book because I was afraid she would read it and be like, where am I? And I'd be like, we don't love you anymore. And my agent was like, you got to take her out. It's confusing people. So that's her. She is real. This is a picture of us. This is me back when I was a racist. You can tell I got the look. I perfected it. This is more of like bewilderment. This is like, F this. This was taken at the Helen Keller birthplace. It's in North Alabama, I think. Why were they selling this flag there? I mean, like, what? That is so effed up. This is the only happy picture I took as a child. This is one of my first experiences hunting. You can tell it's 3:40 in the morning. This was taken in Memphis. We were about to drive to Coldwater, Mississippi and kill something. I was happy because my father told me I could take candy. My editor asked me if I could send him a picture that we could maybe use for the cover of the book, something that really, obviously we didn't use a family picture, but he asked me to send him something that, that I felt was, freighted with meaning, and so this is the picture that I sent him. When I show this picture to my students, I say, this is a metaphor. And I just leave it there. My childhood swing set. Sad. There are 2 or 3 hunting chapters in this book. It's not all about hunting. I think the marketing people wanted to put the antlers on the front because men don't normally buy books. And if they can get like 1% of American men to buy books, that means that like 130% of American women will then also buy books. So the antlers sort of do that, get that done. It's not all about hunting. When people think about hunting now, especially because of great magazines like Garden and Gun, they think of, wealthy white men in LL Bean and Orvis with neckties and things. And that's not really what my experience was like. This is a better example of what deer camp was like. He is at least wearing a suit. He's got a necktie on. He's trying. The book is a little bit about manhood. I want to read a little bit about that. What's that? Page 109. Doing masculine things. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man today? What does it mean to be a man back then? Am I a man? Have I, what sort of things do you have to do to know that you yourself are a man? And that you've made your father proud and the men in your family. I sometimes, and I mean this in all kindness, I sometimes envy primitive tribes who have very defined rites of passage. In contemporary America, we don't. They're all defined in different ways. I grew up, I took girls to Deb and sub-Deb balls, and that's sort of a rite of passage, but then there's so many other rites of passage, and it's hard to know what those are, and it's hard to know when you've gone through them. And this book is a lot about what those are. Pop, they said, had been a beast on the grass, a true wonder in athletic contests, despite being as round and thick as a mastodon. They could say this because it was back when they had mastodons. The man had a head like a medicine ball, legs like Doric columns, shoulders like 2 honey-baked hams on either side of a very wide room. It was generally agreed that he would eventually play ball for Coach Vaught at Ole Miss, or at the very least, wrestle bears for a living. And then, during a fateful high school game versus Hernando, he broke one of the more necessary bones in his leg, and just like that, the dream died. And so, since he would not be making any game-saving sacks or game-winning scores, he set himself to making something even better. A little man just like him, who might fill those cleats and carry the mantle, live the unlived dream. No son of his would have a choice in the matter. The gravity and density of Pop's DNA would be too much to ignore. It took him 3 marriages, but finally he got him a boy. Hot damn, Pop said that long ago day in a hospital just up the road from Graceland. He was excited because he'd seen a pecker. He devoted the next 18 years of his life to raising up the little thing attached to the pecker. The little thing was me. It'll make a man out of you, he was always saying, like the time he told me to saw a deer in half. He handed me a rusty bone saw old enough to have been used by Grant's siege engineers at Vicksburg and told me to run it through the dead thing's pelvis. It'll make a man out of you, boy, he said, handing me the saw. And don't be sawing through his nuts, neither. This is advice I've taken everywhere with me. Don't be sawing through an animal's nuts. I'll stop there. So this, how much time do we have? Because, I'm just getting started. This is a more recent picture of my family. There's me. I must do something about these people. Here's a picture of my wife a few months before we got engaged. If you're wondering why she has that haircut, this guy was on TV around the same time. What's his name? What's his real name? Richard Dean Anderson. Give that guy a beer. This was us on our, these were our wedding pictures right here. Eventually her bangs did grow out. She got prettier and prettier. I did not. The last half of this book it's not about hunting and football and all that. The last half of this book is about what it means to be a grown man. The first half was, really about what it means to be a father and also what it means to be a husband. So I want to read you a little bit of that. Okay. In this chapter, I have just gotten married. And this is our first Thanksgiving, my wife and I and my parents. And if you're married, this happens, right? Like at the first Thanksgiving, where the parents come, the in-laws come over, and you make a turkey, and there's dressing, and it's great. And somebody cries. Here we were, a family settling into the tender holiday moment. My wife returned with a bowl of popcorn and sat down, and I noticed Pop looking at her with that old sly grin. He said to my young wife, I think your thighs may be getting bigger. When he said it, a kernel of corn lodged itself in the vestibule of my nasal cavity, preparing to repel from my nostrils and subdue the man with a flash grenade. I fully expected my wife to burst into tears and run from the room. Instead, she looked at her new father-in-law in a way that indicated he might want to insert his head up a mule's ass. I think she looks great, Mom said. She does, Bob said. It's a compliment. I like big thighs. I'm right here, she said. Can we please stop saying thighs, I said. Haunches is the word, Pop said. She's not a horse, I said. My wife left the room. Thanksgiving was over. My fears had come to pass. Over the next few holidays, it got worse. Pop sang all sorts of things to my wife in our general area of holiday mirth. By Christmas, babies were all the rage. Just whatever you do, Pop said. I hope you don't breastfeed it. Alarms rang at the word breastfeed, and I quickly called in a code red. Let's watch a bass fishing program, I said. Nursing is the best thing you can do for a baby, my wife said. She was a woman of strong will, with many opinions, and did not yet fully understand that one does not discuss mammary glands with my father. There followed a minor fracas over the merits of synthetic versus natural fluids for the infant, and it became clear that my mother had read an article sometime in the early 1970s explaining that breastfeeding was a primitive custom and that modern American mothers should instead nourish their young with Tang and Mr. Pibb. You people are crazy, my wife said. Ain't nothing will ruin a lady's chest like giving a baby too much titty milk, Pop said. Everyone stop right now, I said. I could see the disappointment in my wife's face at having married into a family where the word titty could be passed around at Christmas dinner as freely as a basket of warm crescent rolls. He can't help it, I said. He grew up on a dairy surrounded by animal teats. Well, teats is titties, Pop said. Stop saying titties, I said. It's all nipples, he said. What kind of people talk like this at Christmas dinner, said my wife. I could tell by her look that she considered me to be one of these people. My wife eventually did give birth to 3 girls, all nursed with delicious breast milk. This was our Star Wars themed Christmas card. I wonder who's going to write the memoir in this one. Sad Yoda. Sad she is. So sad. This book is about lots of things. It's not just about manly things. It's about daughters, mothers, brothers, guns, Jesus, farms, cities, fighting, football, baseball, child abuse, animal abuse, lying, cheating. It's about your half-cousins being your stepbrothers. I'm not making that up. Genetic disorders, childbirth, marriage, misogyny, life, death, loss, love, a little more Jesus, crack, neighbors who may smoke crack, and tips for interacting with neighbors who may smoke crack. That's also in the book if you've read it. Mostly though, at the end of the day, this is really a book about fathers. I want to end with one last passage. It's not all funny. Some of it's not funny. And that's on purpose. And I think some people get surprised when they would get to the first half of the book is really a rip-roaring time, I feel like. And it was written that way. But as the book gets complicated and the plot and the characters complicate themselves, there are moments that aren't funny, and I want to share a few of those. I'll just read. Why all of human history is so concerned with its fathers, I'll never know. The mothers are so much nicer. The mothers cook us food and mail us brownies and fold our underwear. A mother quest would be nice. Where are our mothers? They are at home waiting for us to call. They made spaghetti, our favorite. So we go home and we eat the spaghetti and let them wash our underwear, and then it's over. A mother quest, so nice. A cousin quest would be fun. Where are our cousins? They're down by the river and they've got beer. Moms, cousins, uncles, wives, sisters, teachers, lovers. These are all fine things to write about, but it seems like so many of us are always coming back to our fathers who don't really excel in folding underwear. What they excel in is the fine art of being a real son of a bitch. Even the good ones. Sometimes the good ones are the best at being a son of a bitch. It's like being a son of a bitch is what they think fathers are supposed to be. The Bible is full of son of a bitch dads, and so is Faulkner and Star Wars and Shakespeare. You know Shakespeare's dad was a real piece of work, and so was yours probably. If this story is really a father quest, then it started in kindergarten on one of those days where all the dads are invited to eat lunch with their children and endure the humiliation of sitting in chairs that would ensure they could never again reproduce. Pop said he'd be there. I was pretty excited because I've been telling stories about him all year, how he was a big hunter and killed things and would soon allow me to kill things, how he was generally bigger and better than any dad anywhere and could probably beat up all the other dads. Yeah, but my dad has a tattoo of a dragon, one boy said. My dad can beat up a dragon, I said. I have never to this day been so excited to see another human. My heart grows to size every time I think about how much I wanted to see him on that day so they would know, so everyone would know how great he was. Our other fathers and grandfathers arrived. I was not impressed. These men were small. None of them would be carrying a knife, for example. Pop would. He'd show it to everybody if I asked. This was back when you could take a knife to school before people forgot that knives were not for stabbing people. Where's your dad, my friends asked. Ha ha, he's not coming, they said. He's coming, I said. Could they tell I was worried? The growing crowd of fathers spoke in kind, vaguely interested tones to their offspring in baby voices, not at all the way Pop talked to me, one man to another. Soon it was time to walk to lunch, and he was still not there. Everyone lined up, but not me. I would wait. He would come. I knew it. He must. And I did what any little boy would do. I cried. There was a knock on the classroom door. It's him, I thought. It wasn't him. Our mothers, most of them, tell us who they are. They tell everything. Their hearts live on the outside of their bodies because we are their hearts and we are no longer inside their bodies. But our fathers are always aliens. We were never inside them. After that day in kindergarten, my relationship with Pop only got harder. He was just too large to be anything other than the Everest out before me, something to be scaled, conquered, known. I was not an untalented child, was blessed with modest intelligence and curiosity and a gift for making some people laugh, even my sister-in-law this one time. But if you had read even half the stories in this book, you know there was one thing I could not do, and that was to love what my father loved. I quested on woods and water and fields of play and farms of work. I did. I quested like a real son of a bitch, and I could not find him in those places or even myself. It took many years before I realized I must have baffled him as much as he confused me. What must he have made of me with my love of baking and books? What a riddling abyss I must have seemed to him when I announced that when I grew up I desired very much to be a ventriloquist. Mom made sure I got the Bozo the Clown dummy that Christmas, and the only real trick I learned was to create a sense of shame in my father. As I got older, I was no longer allowed to go grocery shopping with Mom or to help her in the kitchen because any boy who liked to cook was a sodomite. Then when I was 12, I overheard a conversation between my parents where Pop described some horrible thing he'd caught me doing the day before. Mom didn't want to hear it, was afraid, but he insisted she know. You know what I found him doing, Pop said, his voice hushed at the horror of it. I don't want to know, she said. He's a good boy, he's a good son. He was in our closet, he said. Doing what? Mom said, moaning, covering her ears. Sewing a goddamn potholder. It was a Father's Day present. I'll stop with that. I also want to show you guys. I still have the potholder. Why do I still have it? I did a terrible job with it. I read that story and my mom was in the back and during the Q&A she was like, do you want it? She's like, I kept it. And I had forgotten after I published the book that I used one of his hunting shirts to make it. It's a little subconscious action for you, Freud. Maybe this was an improvisation after I had slaughtered his favorite LL Bean hunting shirt. Here is a picture of my father and me. First radio interview I did. Are we recording? Yes, she said. Okay, first question. So, how big is your dad? I said, ma'am, it's a metaphor. She said, okay, sorry. Okay, first question. Let's start over. Click. Okay, first question. So, how big are you? This is NPR. This is a real picture. You can, of course, identify me very easily. What was wrong with me? I like to tell my mom when I show these pictures and she's there, I was like, I think it's because I wasn't breastfed. The most important piece of furniture in our home, you can see behind us. That's now in my office. Here's another picture of my dad. World's largest man. What does that title mean? Where did I come up with it? You can ask me that during the Q&A if you want. Thought this was a great metaphorical picture too. He was always just beyond the barbed wire, just on the other side of that thing you couldn't quite get across. All right, so I'm going to end with some reasons you should buy my book, and then we'll do a Q&A. I know you've had lots of time to work up some good questions. First of all, it's got 2 new essays in it. One's called How I Got Away with Writing True Things About My Family. That's in there. Also another essay on memoir and my coming to terms with writing memoir. I did it kicking and screaming. It is lighter and smaller. It's more affordable. It's a great Father's Day gift, as you know. It meets all travel requirements. It's indestructible, cannot be thrown away, and no garbage can will accept it. Can't throw this thing away. Also, it can be worn as a reflective device. Guys, thank you so much. And I think, can I start the questions? Can I do this? We'll take questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, questions.
All right, great. And I don't think we need a mic for questions, do we? You can just scream them out. All right, so, are you ready, class? Don't make me disappointed in Chattanooga. I've been real excited so far. It's pretty. You got mountains and stuff. It's awesome. You got beer at your readings. There's cheese and such. All right, first question. Here we go. Questions. Everybody, if you just have a question, raise your hand. I'm just going to look at So this is amazing. 2. Oh, we got 3. I feel like I'm trying to sell a cow up here. All right, we'll start here, and then we'll go here, and then we'll go back there.
Well, I hate to say, I never heard of you till I heard the NPR interview the other day with Michael Edward Miller, so I'm glad I'm here, because I was laughing so hard. So this is your first book. Do you have any other topics you're getting ready to write about next?
Yes, this is my first book, but I have multitudes inside me.
Other family members?
My mom, I was like, maybe my next book will be about my mom, and my mom was like, I thought this book was about me. Yes, I am my first book, and I'm a few months away from finishing the second book. It is also nonfiction, and it is also about another aspect of my life I did not write about in this book. Secret. It's gonna be good. It'll probably be out within the next 2 years. Depends on how my writing goes this summer. But I've learned a lot. I really felt like I learned to write with this first book. The first essays in this book that I published, which became chapters later, I wrote 8 years ago. And the most recent I wrote a year and a half ago. So I feel like this book was really my learning to be a writer. The next book, they say you've got a lifetime to write your first book. You have a year and a half to write your second book. Because people care about you still. So I'm working hard to get that one out. But I'm looking for it. It's so much fun. What a blessing to finally be able to do what I've always wanted to do. It is such a blessing. So thank you for the question. Somebody here, one of these? Yes.
I have the ultimate stupid question.
Ultimate stupid question.
Where is your wife from?
Where is my wife from? Well, she was born in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Her father was a Presbyterian minister, so they traveled around to a few. They lived in Alexandria, Louisiana. She really spent her formative years in Birmingham, Alabama.
But she's Southern, so she's very Southern.
Yeah, she's Southern. She's a city girl, so she doesn't understand a lot of. She didn't grow up in the same world I grew up in at all. But she's very much Southern. Yes. Next question. We have one right here, and then back. We're going to let's do the gentleman. He had his hand up, and then we're coming to you.
You talked about the career of writing as almost separate from the craft of writing, and do you think you've been able to navigate the industry enough to not be pigeonholed? You feel like the door is open for you to write fiction or short stories or anything else that you might want to do, or does the industry not work that way?
Yeah. Well. Can you narrow that down to one question? Those are all really good questions, by the way, but can you give me something specific to respond to?
Well, I guess it's an open question about the state of the publishing industry. I think all of us that love books know it's not what it was. And your statement was that you didn't want to be pigeonholed as a Southern writer.
Right.
But I guess you could easily be pigeonholed as a nonfiction writer, as a memoirist, or an essayist, or a comedic writer.
It's just as dangerous to be pigeonholed as a humorist, because then people get mad when it's all funny, but then they get mad when it's not all funny, and so that's a catch-22 as well. I don't really know much about the publishing industry. I know that if you hustle and your voice is unique and you can make people want to finish what they're reading, that seems to be all you need to do. You just have to. Those 3 things are just really difficult to do. The hustle part comes in doing events like this. I have a day job. I teach. It's hard to be away from my family for 60. I don't know. I've pretty much been away from home 3 months the last year. So that's difficult. But I think you got to hustle, and the hustle. I do that also not just so I will sell books, but so my editor and my agent see that happening, and other potential publishers and editors of my work see that happening, to see me working hard. I tell my students that they need to be no less than 51% artist. The other 49% can be in marketing. You have to think about how people are reacting to your book. You've got to think about everything from the title, the blurb on the book jacket, what sort of events you're going to do, what will you do at your events, who you want publishing your book. When this book went to auction, and I was very lucky that the book went to auction, I had phone meetings with 10, 12 different publishing houses to find out which one I wanted to buy my book. I mean, what a blessing and a privilege to have that. How amazing. But then it's like, oh wait, do I want to go with like the really cool small press who's going to like, I'm going to love them so much they're going to like invite me to their kids' weddings? Or do I want to go with the big one who, I'll just be another person there, but it's a big one, right? I'll just be another name on their list of names. And so all these questions are marketing questions that you have to think about that have nothing to do with writing, or very little to do. And I feel like as long as I remember I'm more than 50% writer, the other part can think about the other stuff. But I always have to just be thinking about the story I want to write, the story I want to tell, and really at the end of the day, the story I want to read. I wrote this book because I wanted to read a funny book that made me laugh almost to the end. My favorite book is probably A Confederacy of Dunces. A book that's disappointing for me in parts. And I think maybe a lot of that's probably because of my own shortcomings as a reader. And I'm not saying my book is better than that book at all, but I wanted to write a book that never made me say, why is this not funny right now? Like, what was this guy drinking? Like, he killed himself after he wrote it. That had something to do with it, maybe. That's mean. But it's true, and maybe I need to go back and read that book 10 more times. But I wanted to write a book that I wanted to read. I was so sick of books saying laugh out loud funny on the back, and I'd read the stupid book, and it wasn't funny. I hated that. I'm like, laugh out loud? I doubt. That became my first, like, when I would read laugh out loud on the blurb on the back, I would immediately assume it was trying really hard and wasn't funny. Or it was supposed to be funny. And I wanted to write a book that I wanted to read. I told my editor, do not put the words laugh out loud anywhere on this book or I will burn your house down. I feel like if I can write a book that I want to read, that's what it takes. That's what I need to do. But I always have to be thinking about the market. And I mean, right now I'm thinking about titles for the second book, and that's a difficult question because I find myself thinking, what would people on Amazon want my book title to be called? What would make, the chair of the English department at 100,000 universities around the world, what would make them want to hire me to come talk? What would a title be to grab them? Those are not dumb questions, but you have to be the master of those questions. You can't let them be the master of you. That's a long and terrible answer to a great question. A question, we have in the blue and then here. Yes.
Just a follow-up to the stupid question.
Okay.
How did you meet your wife? Maybe in the book. But
How did I meet my wife? I met my wife when she was 15 years old. I was 18 in college. I went to Belhaven College in Jackson, Mississippi for my undergrad. And she was a ballet dancer in Birmingham, and she and her sister was in my class, my freshman class at Belhaven. And her sister hated me so much. Why? Because I was funny. And there are people in the world who hate funny people so much. Just go to Amazon.com. You'll meet some of these people. You know what I did? I would actually go to I would click on their name, and I'd find out what was on their wish list. And I'd find out what other stupid books they were buying. And then I'd click on like Speak Memory, Nabokov. And I'd read the negative reviews of his book, and I'd be like, well, if he can write a bad book, so can I. My sister-in-law hated me. And I dated every girl in my college, all of them. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how it happened, but it did. At least once I went out with all of them, and she was the only one I didn't go out with. I was like, why will this girl not go out with me? She hated me, which made me really want to go out with her bad. Like, I got just one day so I could be like, I did it! All of them. University of Alabama, like undefeated. I was a terrible person in college, by the way. I went through my own period of growth. And I met her sister. Her sister came and visited her, and I thought, this is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. I do not want to date her sister. I want to be with her forever and give her so many babies. And I did. I don't know how I did it. I think she was taking Sudafed or Benadryl that day. Right here in a beautiful jacket.
Thank you. I was just wondering how this process of writing the book was therapeutic or cathartic for your childhood. You
Ooh.
have great fun memories and you have very sad things.
I used to sort of shun the idea of writing as therapy. That sounded too like Oprah Winfrey to me. I resisted that probably because that idea frightened me, or maybe I thought I needed therapy secretly deep down. I used to not like that idea. But when you're writing, you're not just writing an anecdote. I mean, a lot of the stories in this book were things that I've told around campfires and things I told, while hiking out in the woods or sitting on front porches or at comedy clubs. Or doing comedy improv when I was younger. These were stories I came back to over and over again. So clearly there was something about the anecdote, the event, that was memorable. But when I was telling the stories, I was just recounting the action in a funny way. But when you write a story, and this is advice to memoirists out there, you can't just write the events. You can't just write the action of the story. You have to inquire as to the meaning. Well, why did that happen? Why did my dad ask me to cheat in a football game? Why? The answer becomes what you write about. Well, maybe it was this. Well, maybe it was that. Maybe it was because this happened in my past, in our past. Maybe it was because he wanted X or Y or Z for me. And so that sort of inquiry is what drove the whole book, is trying to find out, why did this happen? Why did my mother not stop my father from abusing me, or what I thought was maybe abuse? Maybe it wasn't. You'll have to read the book and decide for yourself. Why did she not stop it? Was it because it wasn't really abuse? Was it because she was afraid of my father? I wrote to find out the answers. And I realized because you have to figure out why characters are behaving the way they are. And so I realized as I was finishing the book, and I found myself weeping constantly as I'm finishing the book, not just the last chapter, but moments. When I was writing certain chapters that took place in Oxford, I would go back and I would play on YouTube old Ole Miss football games, and it would take me to a place that I was trying to get to write the stories, and I would find myself weeping, writing these really funny, meaningful moments. And I'm like, it's like therapy. And I'm like, I could see it was happening. It was because I was trying to figure out who I was and how I got like I am. I'm not expecting to quote Prince right now. There's that line from, maybe it's When the Doves Cry, when he's like, maybe I'm like my mother. What's the line? Maybe I'm like my... She's never satisfied. Maybe I'm like my father. What's the line? What? Listen to your Prince, people. But I realized that's what he's doing, right? He's like, maybe I'm like my mom because of this, but maybe I'm like my dad because of this. He's trying to figure out who he is as a person. And my friends who are therapists and counselors and analysts, they tell me, they're like, that's kind of what we do, man. We just talk to people and say, why do you think you do that? Why do you think you got mad that thing happened? It's just, you just have to be curious about your own life. So I can't remember what your question was, but I think I answered it. We'll do one or two more? All right, we'll do this hand right back here. That's you.
Maybe I'm just like my father, too bold.
Too bold, that's right. Or She's Never Satisfied, yeah. He was a memoirist, wasn't he? All right, we have a hand up, yeah. I'll repeat the question.
Stand up, I think I got the world's largest audience member. Before I read your book, I read about it. And I read about a collaboration between yourself, an artist, and a musician. I'm familiar with the artist, not with the musician. But was that collaboration maybe a reflection of what you do when you're not writing?
So that what you're describing is called the Trio Project.
Yeah.
And it was, he's asking about this collaboration between my book and a songwriter and an artist, and it was on my website for a while. And the way it works is it's called the Trio Project, and it's really driven, and the visionary behind it is a writer named Sherry Smith, who lives in North Carolina. Excuse me. And what they do is they take a book and then they give it to a songwriter who writes a song inspired by it, and then they give it to an artist who creates a great work of art that's inspired by it. And then the art show, the exhibition, goes on tour around the country for a whole year when those books are touring and such. And so Mac McAnally, the great Southern songwriter who was born in Mississippi, he wrote a song inspired by my book, which was amazing. He's one more Grammy Musician of the Year, a CMA Musician of the Year awards than anyone else, so that was pretty amazing. I will say that's something that just came to me. They just asked me if I would be involved. I said absolutely. But one of the reasons I moved to Savannah, Georgia, was because I actually moved to SCAD to write speeches for the president of SCAD, as you heard on the radio interview. And I wasn't planning on doing that. I was teaching English at a boarding school in Mississippi that I had moved to after Hurricane Katrina when I had been at Tulane. But I saw SCAD, and it's this tiny town. It's smaller. How many people do you have in Chattanooga?
1 million in the 16-county region, 500,000 in the county.
So Savannah is a little smaller than Chattanooga. Actually, it's a lot smaller. And you have the world's largest art school in Savannah. We have a campus in France, Hong Kong, one in Atlanta, 12,000 students. Most people don't know it's the world's largest nonprofit arts university. So you got this huge art school in this tiny town, and so what that meant is, like, per capita, you have more artists and art galleries than almost anywhere else in America, even in Manhattan. And so I was walking around when I was interviewing for the job, and I was like, I feel like if I come here, like, I'll just be among awesomeness, and it will make me a better artist and writer. I'd see the student work, and I'd see the professor's work, and I'd see all these galleries, and I'm like, growing up in Mississippi is great fodder if you're a creative person. We pretty much invented most of American music and American literature. It's a great place to be from. What a student asked me earlier today, they were like, was it weird telling your parents you wanted to be a writer? I'm like, from Mississippi, actually no. That's a great blessing. Be a preacher, a lawyer, a writer, or Elvis Presley. You can do any of those things if you're from Mississippi. But I knew that I'd grown up sort of in a cultural poverty. I didn't know that those things were there. I discovered, how I discovered the blues? Led Zeppelin. I was right there. My grandmother lived in Greenwood, Mississippi. I spent every summer in Greenwood, Mississippi. Like Robert Johnson and, Bob Dylan and, voter registration and all these things were happening right there, and I just didn't even know it. And so when I came to SCAD, I was like, this is a place where a lot is happening. I need to put myself around these people who make my game better. So that was a sort of roundabout way to answer the collaboration question. If you've read my work at the Oxford American, there's always an illustration with my pieces. Those are all artists that I've met at SCAD. I've had animators in the animation department animate me reading my stories, and then they create these little animations. Unfortunately, we can't put any of them online, but there's so many things like that I like to do because I'm there, and I do think it has made my writing better being there. Any other questions? Yes, back here.
What did your family have to say about things you wrote about them in your book?
What did my family have to say? So I knew that my mom, sorry about the microphone sizzling there. The question was, what did my family say about the book? I knew that my mom would love anything I did because she's my mother. I could hit her with a bat in the head and she'd be like, why'd you do that? Are you hungry? And I don't want to make light of her deep love for me, but I knew I had my mom in the bag. I didn't have to worry about her. I told my wife when we got married, I met my wife when she was 15. We didn't get married until she was 25. It was a 10-year wilderness period where she had a lot of reckoning to do with the Lord about it. I'm not making that up. She was really into soccer players for like 10 years. Guys who had tattoos of Eddie Vedder on their arm. Disgusting. Guys who wore cologne. Where was I? Oh yeah, my wife. When we got married, I knew I was just about to start trying to write some sort of book. And so she knew what she was signing up for, knew that I was probably going to be writing a little bit about my life. And I remember telling her before the first story came out, I was like, babe, if you want a house with more than one bathroom, you'll let me write this book. And she said, I really want more than one bathroom. That's how that worked. And a lot of people ask about my father. You know, had my father, did he read it before he passed away? He passed away as I was finishing the book. He did, or rather my mom read parts of it to him because he didn't read books. It didn't talk about doe urine. That's a hunting reference. And so I would publish things like the Oxford American, Creative Nonfiction, other magazines, and I would send them to my mom, and I'd get home for Thanksgiving with my family, and I would see them on the coffee table. And I would know that they had been read. It was scary, because I was saying very true things that most men don't get to say to their fathers, because their fathers won't hear it. And about other people in my family, but also my father. So I'm sitting there with my dad, it's Thanksgiving, he's watching Cops or something. I'm like, I see the magazine. I'm like, well, this is the football story, The Wishbone. If you've read the book, it's a really great chapter. I think it is. And I said, did you read that chapter? He said, well, your mama read it to me. So what'd you think, old man? And he just sort of got a smile. He said, we had a big time, didn't we? Which was his way of saying, I liked it. Which I love that phrase, we had a big time. He was saying, it was a wild ride, wasn't it? My brother was a very similar sort of man. He's a farmer in Natchez, Mississippi. There's a lot about him in the book. And I wanted to ask him, like, well, what'd you think? You know, you want to know what your loved ones love the book. And I didn't know how to ask him. And about a week after the book came out, everybody's talking about it on Facebook and stuff. And he sent me a Facebook message, and I was like, oh, he's like going to say, like, that didn't happen, or you didn't know that Daddy raped me, or something. I was so afraid something terrible would be exposed. Like, oh, I should have interviewed everybody before I wrote this. There's a passage in the book where a very small detail, just buried in one of the stories, where I talk about an Iron Maiden poster that my brother had. A throwaway detail. And his Facebook message said, hey, good job on the book. I still got that Iron Maiden poster. Which was his way of saying, I read your goddamn book, you fool, and it ain't bad. That was as expressive as he could be. And then he sent me illegally a fifth of Jack Daniels, and I knew that it would be okay. The only advice I would give along those lines is if you publish your stories here and there, put them on Facebook, put them on Twitter, put them on social media, let your friends see them. I mean, people, like if you've read this book, people who I'm talking about and making a lot of fun of in a loving way in the book, I'm friends with those people on Facebook. And I knew when I posted a story, they would be reading it because they were liking it, or they'd comment, or they'd share it or something. And I did that for 2 years, and I knew that when the book came out, most of the stories that I thought I might upset people about had been out there, and they had had a chance to read them, and nobody assaulted me. And so when I went to Mississippi on book tour, Memphis, I'll end with this story. I'll end with this. If you have another question, you can ask me at the signing table. I was a little worried about what people from home would say. I was worried that somebody would come up to a reading like this and be like, hey, that dude in chapter 3, was that Rodney? I'd be like, well, depends. What's your name? I was worried about that a little bit. As you saw in the author's note, I changed the names of the people in this book because most of those people own guns. So I was in Memphis. A lot of my family were there. I was really worried. There were some family members who I knew had a beef with my side of the family. Nobody said anything during the Q&A. I was expecting somebody to get up and be like, what right have you? But nobody did. I'm at the signing table. Lines all there. Got an aunt, cousin. I got some step cousins. I've got some second cousins. I've got some great aunts. I mean, it's just the whole family's there. It was scary. And I'm signing books. It was fun. Everybody's congratulating me, patting me on the back. And then the line got really quiet. Like somebody was there. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, he's like, you know something's about to happen. I was signing books, and I sort of looked up, and a book got slid across the table. I opened up the book to sign it, and there was a picture of two people cutting a wedding cake. And it was one of those old pictures that was sort of drained of color a little bit. It was a color photograph. It was a hard photograph. And I looked at it and realized this was my father. This was his first marriage. He was 18 years old in the photograph. I had never seen this picture. I'd never met this person. But in this picture was his first wife, whom in the book I describe as a hussy. And I look up and I say, "Do I know you?" And she says, "I'm the hussy." And I looked at her and I looked at the picture and I looked at her, and then now everybody's sort of like, "Uh-oh." And I went, "Well, you don't look like a hussy at all." And that seemed to do the trick. And then I signed in her book, "Dear Hussy." I was a little upset about that. I felt like she sort of emotionally assaulted me with this picture of my father in front of all these people. And so she friended me on Facebook, and my mom was like, "How do you know her?" I was like, "I don't even know who that is. Is that the hussy?" My mom has not let it go. Thank you guys so much.